Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn out of poem 774. It is a lonesome glee. Now we're back to Emily and birds singing. We're back to the idea of Shelley's To a Skylark, to Keats's Ode to a Nightingale. The idea that the song of the bird somehow represents Emily as singer. And we've seen this so many times. Our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 773. We just finished with 773, Deprived of Other Banquet. And I think these two poems can easily be read together. If, as we argued in 773, if you must learn to rely on yourself, then singing is enough, even if it's only singing for yourself. One scholar has called this Emily as the disenfranchised singer. I mean, imagine it. It's taken us a long time, right, to finally get to 774, which is one before 775. At 775, we are 1,000 poems away from finishing the Johnson edition. So we got a long ways to go, to borrow from the word of the previous poem, as pilgrims who are working through this stuff. And yet, Emily wrote all these poems, the majority of which never ever got seen by more than one or two folks. And yet somehow she was able to argue for Glee. Taking us back, you'll remember this idea of Glee and Lonesome Glee to poem 750. You'll maybe remember when we played that game just recently. As just a reminder, because it's such a beautiful little poem. Let's go back to it real fast before we read this one. Growth of man, like growth of nature, gravitates within. Atmosphere and sun endorse it, but it stir alone. Each its difficult ideal must achieve itself through the solitary prowess of a silent life. Effort is the sole condition, patience of itself, patience of opposing forces, and intact belief. Looking on is the department of its audience, but transaction is assisted by no countenance. In other words, the work that the singer does is predominantly solitary. This is how she says it. It is a lonesome glee, yet sanctifies the mind with fair association afar upon the wind. A bird to overhear, delight without a cause, a restless as invisible, a matter of the skies. Now, again, there's some religious language here with this use of the word sanctifies the mind, and she loves again to come back to the idea of minds and souls and the like. She says it is a lonesome glee. She'll use this word glee in 13 of her poems. Many people have argued that Emily is a downer. I don't think so at all. In fact, I think Emily is a poet of glee. But it is a circumscribed glee. It is a sanctified glee. It is a delight without a cause, if you will. She says it is a lonesome glee, yet sanctifies the mind with fair association. In other words, there is a sense, she says, that my writing these poems is like the bird singing for no reason other than to sing as it flies away. Even you don't have to see the bird to know the bird exists, because of course the bird's song. Again, we're obviously back to our study of Shelley's To a Skylark, no doubt. A bird to overhear, then she'll say it, delight without a cause. In other words, delight is mere existence, as the bird singing is mere existence. Emily will write even if there's no one necessarily there to read these poems. A bird to overhear, delight without a cause, and then she'll say it, a restless as invisible. Many have argued that these two lines capture much of what she thought she was doing in the writing of all these poems, and then she'll say it finally, it's a matter of the skies. Now, there is a reading of this matter of the skies that says Emily's knowing she's going to die, and then after the fact, as in once she has gone to heaven, a matter of the skies, that her poetry will then be discovered. And obviously that did happen as tribute to the work we're doing here with her poetry. At 2A for messages, I think that Emily is arguing here that often artists in the end must sing for themselves. Of course, they can have people who will listen, but it is for her, again, that delight without a cause. At 2b, well, the power of the word picture of Emily as bird and as singer is profound. And at 3a, we've mentioned Shelley, Skylark, and Keats as nightingale. I'd like to as well point out, in our study of the Bhagavad Gita, book 2, you'll remember, you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your labor. Desire for the fruits must never be your motive in working. Never give way to laziness either, is the way that passage ends. Think about the argument that's being made there and the argument that Emily is making here. In other words, instead she would say, not you have the right to work, but I have the right to sing. But for the singing's sake only, right? Not for any reward. Finally, at 3b, to own a poem like this, when was a time when you worked or you sang for the tune's sake only? Maybe it's this very study of Emily right now. I hope so. Thank you.